Welcome to Crave for Gold, where your craving is for motivation and hunger. In this video, I am providing you notes of Chapter 6 of Indian Politics, The Crisis of Democratic Order. So without any delay, let's start our chapter. Notes. The chapter deals with the series of events that led to the imposition of emergency in June 1975, its consequences, controversies, lessons, and the defeat of Congress in Lok Sabha election of 1977. Economic situation during the 1970s. The Bangladesh crisis had put a heavy strain on Indian economy. About 8 million people crossed over the East Pakistan border into India. After the Indo-Pak War of 1971, the US government stopped all aid to India. Third, prices in the economy increased by 23% in 1973 and 30% in 1974. High level of inflation caused hardship to people. Fourth, industrial growth was low and unemployment was very high, particularly in rural areas. 5. Sharp decline in agricultural productivity due to failure of monsoons in 1972 and 73. Food grain output declined by 8%. That is not green, that is grain. ये आप correct कर लेना. 6. The government also reduced its expenditure. Now let's take a look on Gujarat movement. A student agitation in January 1974 in Gujarat. Causes क्या थे? Rising prices of food grains, cooking oil and other essential commodities, corruption in high places. So इसको लेकर जो activities वहाँ पर हुई, a student protest was joined by major opposition parties, become widespread due to the impositions of president rules in the state. Morarji Desai announced that he would go on infinite fast if fresh elections were not held in this state. अब बिहार मूवमेंट की तरफ देखते हैं कि बिहार में क्या हुआ था. So, students protest in Bihar in March 1974. वहाँ के causes क्या थे? Rising prices, food scarcity, unemployment, corruption. Demand क्या थी? Fresh elections to the state legislature. Achievements क्या थी वहाँ पर? Assembly elections were held in Gujarat in June 1975. The Congress was defeated in this election. Activities. Jaya Prakash Narayan JP also joined the movement and led this student movement. On JP's demand, the movement was supposed to remain non-violent and that it will not limit itself to Bihar. JP gave a call for total revolution in social, economic and political spheres in order to establish true democracy. A series of bandhs, gehruas and strikes were organized, protest against Bihar government. Demands. Dismissal of Congress government in Bihar. The government refused to resign. Conflict with judiciary. Conflict between the parliament and judiciary emerged on a number of issues. Can the parliament abridge fundamental rights? The Supreme Court said that parliament cannot amend the constitution in a manner that rights are curtailed. The Parliament amended the constitution saying that it cannot abridge fundamental rights. These FR means fundamental rights implementing directive principles. The Supreme Court rejected this provision as well. In 1973, after the Keshwananda Bharti case, this is another point, the government set aside the seniority of 3 judges and appointed Justice A. and Ray as Chief Justice of India. This became very controversial, thus constitutional interpretations and political ideologies were getting mixed up. So, causes of emergency, Article 352. Under this article, the government can declare national emergency on the grounds of war or external aggression or armed rebellion. After proclamation of emergency, the federal distributions of power remain practically suspended. These points are same. All the powers are concentrated in the hands of union government. The government can curtail or restrict all or any of the fundamental rights during emergency. So there are basically 4 points. Economic turmoil. There was an atmosphere of dissatisfaction with the prevailing situation all over the country. There was high level of inflation, low industrial growth, unemployment, food prices, etc. The government even froze the salaries of its employees. Political crisis. There were protests against the government against matters such as unemployment, corruption, inflation, etc. Opposition parties, these are like one point only. Opposition parties led these protests directly or indirectly. For example, the Gujarat and Bihar movement. There was also an increase in activities of Marxist group. The government decided that a grave economic crisis had arisen and imposed emergency on 25 June 1975. This is very, very, very important. And I have marked the important questions which can come in your exam with red color. So you can check out. On the grounds of internal disturbances, ये grounds एक बार ही होगा. So consequences जान लेते हैं आप. Consequences is outcomes. उसके बाद क्या हुआ वो हम जानते हैं. Strikes were banned and the government felt that frequent occurrence of agitations, protests and collective actions are not good for democracy. Many opposition leaders were jailed. Political workers were arrested as well. The government had banned Rashtra Swayamsevak Sangh, that is RSS, and Jamaat-e-Islami. The government even suspended freedom of the press. Newspapers were asked to get prior approval for all material to be published. Fundamental rights of citizens stood suspended, including the right to constitutional remedies under Article 32. The government made extensive use of preventive detention. The parliament also brought in many new changes to constitution. These were as follows. The election of Prime Minister, President and Vice President could not be challenged in the court. The 42nd Amendment was also passed during the emergency. As per the amendment, some of the changes brought in. Duration of legislation in the country was extended from 5 to 6 years. During an emergency, elections can be postponed by 1 year. Act of dissent and resistance to emergency. Many political workers who were not arrested in the first wave went underground and organized protests against the government. Newspapers like the Indian Express and Statements left blank spaces where news items had been censored. This was a protest against press censorship. This is very important, guys. You have to remember the names of the newspaper, which is the Indian Express and Statesman, rather than submit to censorship. Many underground newsletters and leaflets were published to bypass censorship. Writers such as Shivarama Karanth and Phanishwar Nath Renu returned their awards in protest. Both were awarded with Padma Bhushan and Padma Shri respectively. ये शिवरामा जो करण थे इनको मिला था पद्म भूषण, ये 1 मार्क्स में आ सकता है. एंड फणीश्वर नाथ जो थे वो किससे अवॉर्डेड थे? पद्मश्री. तो ये आपको याद रखना है. सेकेंडली, लेसन्स फ्रॉम द इमरजेंसी जो हमने सीखे थे. एक्सट्रीमली डिफिकल्ट टू डू अवे विद डेमोक्रेसी इन इंडिया. Though India ceased to be democratic as some observers hold during the emergency, it must be noted that the normal functioning resumed within a short span of time. Resolution of some constitutional ambiguities. Emergency brought out some constitutional ambiguities. These have been rectified since. For example, now internal emergency can be declared only on the grounds of armed rebellion, and it is necessary that the advice must be given in written by the Council of Ministers. Written में advice देनी है, ये writing नहीं होगा, written होगा. Third, protection of civil rights essential. During the emergency, the judiciary could not protect civil liberties of the people. So the courts over the year have been taken. ये जो courts है ये court है basically. And fourth point है vulnerable groups, police and bureaucracy. Emergency also proved that people and bureaucracy are vulnerable to political pressure and thus threatened to become committed. So this could be avoided. Freedom of the press. Freedom of the press must be ensured as it brings out mischievous irregularities existent between the government and citizens. ये जो ब्लू से है, ये जो ब्लू कलर से जितने भी आएंगे वो मैंने स्टेटमेंट लिखी हुई है. एज इट पेपर में आपको ये स्टेटमेंट मिल जाएगी और आपको उसको जस्टिफाई करना पड़ेगा, इसके बारे में बताना पड़ेगा. क्वेश्चंस के फॉर्म में नहीं आती, कभी कभी हमारे जो क्वेश्चंस है वो स्टेटमेंट के थ्रू भी आते हैं. तो ये स्टेटमेंट आप याद रखना. Governments that are perceived to be anti-democratic are severely punished by the voters. During the emergency, the Congress government was perceived as anti-democratic as it misused constitutional provisions and powers and suspended civil liberties, converting democratic government into authoritarian rule, because of which public opinion was against the Congress. The opposition also fought the election on the slogan "Save Democracy," turning the 1977 election into a referendum. Major opposition parties had formed a new party known as Janata Party under the leadership of Jayaprakash Narayan. Even some Congress leaders joined this party. Fourth, some other Congress leaders had formed a party, Congress for Democracy. Electoral campaigns also focused on non-democratic Congress rule. As a result, the Congress party was defeated in 1977 general election, and therefore anti-democratic government are punished by the voters. So basically इसमें हमने क्या किया, justify कर दिया इस statement को. Second जो हमारी statement है, the government that are seen to be unstable and quarrelsome are severely punished by the voters. The Janata Party government came into being after 1977 Lok Sabha elections. However, its organization was far from being cohesive. Within the party, there was stiff competition among three leaders for the post of Prime Minister. First, Morarji Desai, second, Charan Singh, and third leader is Jagjeevan Ram. ये आपको याद रखने हैं. Morarji Desai became the Prime Minister, but the power struggle within the party continued. It lacked direction, leadership, and common program. It could not bring about a fundamental change in policies from those pursued by the Congress. The Janata Party also split and lost majority within 18 months. Another government headed by Charan Singh was formed. Eventually, it dissolved due to withdrawal of support of Congress. Fresh Lok Sabha elections were held in 1980, in which the Janata Party suffered a comprehensive defeat. In this way, voters rightly punished the ruling party whose leaders were fighting amongst themselves. Secondly, हमारा जो statement है वो मैंने blue color से नहीं की है, उसको मैं कर दूंगी बाद में. Changes in Indian politics between 1967 and 1977. So, rise of coalition government in states. With the 1967 general election, coalition government of non-Congress parties were formed in many states. Also because the Congress lost majority in 9 states. Second, increase of defections. Changes were also marked in political stability as evident from making and unmaking of government due to defections. Rise of non-Congressism. Different political parties had alliance together as an anti-Congress front. Fourth, split in Congress party. A major change was marked by split in Congress party in 1969 as the Congress O and the Congress R. Party competition was formally polarized. Personalized politics is our sixth point. Politics was becoming too personalized and the government authority was being converted into personal authority. Arguably evident from emergency 1975 to 77. Changes in the character of Congress. The most important change that took place was the Congress association with the particular ideology, that is socialist ideology, from being an umbrella party. 8. Emergence of new political party. A number of political parties also mushroomed. This is mushroomed. Emergence of new political parties mushroomed in इंडियन पॉलिटिक्स. शाह कमीशन ऑफ इंक्वायरी बिठाई गई थी जिसमें हमें पता लगाया था कि बेसिकली इमरजेंसी के टाइम क्या क्या हुआ, क्योंकि जितनी भी हमारे पास न्यूज थी वो ऑथेंटिक नहीं थी. तो शाह कमीशन की इंक्वायरी से हमारे पास ऑथेंटिक न्यूज निकल के आती है. अपॉइंटेड बाय जनता पार्टी गवर्नमेंट इन May 1977, headed by J.C. Shah, purpose to inquire into abuse of authority, excess and malpractice is committed on action taken during the emergency. Findings क्या थी? Nearly 1,11,000 people were arrested under preventive detention laws. Several restrictions were put on the press, sometimes without proper legal sanctions. The general manager of Delhi Power Supply Corporation received verbal orders from the office of LD government of Delhi to cut electricity to old newspaper press at 2 a.m. on 26 June 1975. 4. Torture and custodial deaths occurred during the emergency. Arbitrary relocation of poor also took place. 6. There were also cases of compulsory sterilization. 7. Government power was even exercised by those who had no official position. खत्म. अब जाके इनको एक बार पढ़ो और टॉप मार लो, और अगर नहीं मार पाए तो भी पार्टी करो. Thank you. Hope these notes will help you to get better results.